presentation will be facilitated by Itzel Barrera. She's a licensed master social worker, and she's our Southern regional coordinator for our fostering family program. So on that note, I'll let you take over, Itzel.
Hey, well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to be able to provide this training for you guys. So just to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about the clinical issues for children and youth. We're going to be talking about the clinical issues for caregivers or guardians, parenting styles, and then we're also going to do some parenting supports. So kinship care is not new. Relatives and friends have been caring for children in the absence of parents for centuries, functioning as a secondary support for the immediate family. What is new is an increase in the number of relatives and kinship families becoming permanent or long-term primary caregivers. So let's start off by talking about some of the clinical issues that impact the children you may be caring for. So the first one is loss. The most obvious loss for a child is the loss of a parent. Often children believe that it is better to have an abusive or absent parent than to not have any parent at all. The children's loss of a sibling is another thing. We often know that older siblings take on a parentified role where they care for their younger siblings when their parents don't care for them. Sometimes the loss of a parentified sibling may be just as hard as the loss of a parent. Many children may tolerate the loss of their parents if they are placed in the same home as their siblings. So the child's loss of privacy and space, loss of a place to call home of their own, or having their own bedroom is something that's very difficult for children and youth as well. The children's loss of normalcy. So children may state, I wish I lived with my parents like other kids or my friends, or I wish I had a normal parent like other kids is something that they usually state. They may fabricate stories about why they are living with their relatives by stating like my parents are in the hospital, or my dad's in the service, or my mom is working in another city. The child's loss of rights, privileges, and entitlements. They might feel indebted rather than entitled to live with their relatives. Child's loss in relationship is the last one. Before living with their relative, the child may have viewed the relative as unconditional, loyal, and forgiving. Just a private confidant or a friend, not a disciplinarian. So that might be like a really difficult thing for a lot of the children and youth that might be living in your home with you. The role of a protector has now become the enemy, as you must now act like a parent to the child. So that's always very difficult for them. Rejection and abandonment. So children try to justify and rationalize why their parents couldn't keep or properly care for them. Feelings of rejection and abandonment, however, may still be subconsciously prevalent or simply denied. Children may experience guilt and low self-esteem if they internalize responsibility for causing their parents to place them with a relative, perceiving themselves as burdens to their parents and now to their kinship caregivers, or feel inferior to other children, relatives, and siblings who are not in care. Feeling inferior or different from other children may also be a source of low self-esteem for children in kinship care. Some children seem to find living with divorced or separated parents more socially acceptable than living with their relatives. The child's anger and resentment may arise from or be directed at the parents, relative caregivers, or agency, court system, or professionals. So children may be angry with their parents for allowing themselves to be put in a situation that resulted in the child's placement, taking advantage of relatives by giving them additional children and responsibilities, choosing to give them away instead of another sibling, choosing to conceive additional children while the child is still in placement, continuing to have the same problems that resulted in the child's initial placement, such as drug problems, employment, evictions, incarceration, and thus failing to regain custody. Parental conflict with kinship caregiver, not keeping visits, contact, or promises can also be a thing that the child would be angry about. The parent's lifestyle, which causes embarrassment for the child, is also very difficult for them. So the child may be angry with or resent the kinship caregiver for agreeing to receive the placement of the child in their home, reasoning that if you hadn't taken me, then I'd still be placed with my parents. They may also resent the caregiver for petitioning for custody or guardianship or taking legal action against the parent, such as putting a restraining order or reporting abuse. The child may experience divided loyalties among the kinship caregiver, the parent, the siblings, and professionals. These divided loyalties become a problem for the child when the recipient of the child's loyalty are in competition with each other. The child is given an ultimatum to choose between loved ones or risk rejection, or the child is manipulated or triangulated by individuals to whom the child is loyal to. The major source of embarrassment for the child in kinship care is the discovery that by others that the child is not being raised by their own parents. The two most embarrassing situations for children in kinship care are when the age difference between themselves and their caregiver is visible, extreme, and obvious, and when the relative caregiver is unable to publicly participate with them in normal parent-child activities, such as parents and sports events or father-daughter dances. So relative placements are easily subjected to disruption by children as non-relative placements. The child's attempt to sabotage may be out of fear of losing contact with their parents, or they may be hopeful that by acting out, they may return with their parents. So redefining boundaries and relationships. Accepting the exchange of roles between the kinship caregiver and the parent is one of the most difficult tasks for the child. The child must adjust to seeing the relative as the primary caregiver, decision maker, authority figure, and disciplinarian, and the parent as a supporter or advisor only. Some of the things that you might see on just in the behaviors that the kids might demonstrate is they might test you constantly, they might defy you, and resenting the caregiver's authority is something that's a very common thing that you might see in the children that are placed in your home. Other things will also be feeling as though the parent should have authority, resenting the caregiver having authority over the parent's involvement, encouraging the parent to defy the caregiver's authority and control, becoming angry with the parent for accepting the caregiver's authority, complaining to the parent or professional about the caregiver's misuse of or abuse of authority, manipulating and attempting to split the caregiver and parent, this is especially seen if there's conflict between the parents and the caregivers. The child in kinship care is often concerned with issues of illness and death. They may question, who will take care of my mom and dad if I'm not there? Who will take care of grandma and grandpa if they get sick? Or who is going to take care of me if everyone gets sick or dies? These are concerns that may be triggered by previous losses and separations. The kinship caregiver's age and medical condition associated with the aging, and the child's codependency with the parent and the caregiver. So now let's talk about the clinical issues for the caregivers. So with regarding to loss, relatives who take on the care of the kinship child or the youth may experience multiple losses. Interrupted life cycles, such as postponed plans of retirement or second career, delayed goals, intrusion on space and privacy, and changes in the caregiver's role and relationship with the child or youth and the children's parents. Changes in the caregiver's roles and boundaries occur not only with respect to the child, but also with respect to the child's parents. Relationships with the parents are redefined as the kinship caregiver undergoes a transformation from supporter to primary caregiver, from advisor to decision maker, and from friend or peer to authority figure. For example, the relative may have the authority to determine if, when, how, and where the parent may visit or have contact with the child. Boundaries will shift and the child may feel confused and resentful towards relatives bossing him or her around and telling the parents what they can and cannot do. Kinship caregivers may experience guilt and embarrassment if they feel responsible for the parent's loss of the child. Many relatives, especially grandparents, wonder if the parent's problems are as a result of their own failures as a relative or a parent. Kinship caregivers may also feel guilty about being able to care for their child better than the parent did. Embarrassment and guilt may result from the caregiver reporting or giving information to agencies that may have negative impact on the parent's image. And then finally, embarrassment may arise when the caregiver must request services from public agencies such as TANF or medical, financial, and medical health services. Transference and projection arise when the kinship caregiver has unresolved issues with the parent that are then transferred or projected to the child. So for example, acknowledging a child's resemblance to the parents is usually the highest compliment that can be paid to a child and a parent. If the comparisons and resemblance are considered negative though, then the child is subjected to ridicule and misplaced feelings from the caregiver. So split loyalties, this dilemma arises when the caregiver must place the needs of the child before those of the parents, whom the caregiver may have known first, cared for, or been otherwise attached to. Many kinship caregivers, especially grandparents, have been the recipients of comments from parents such as, "How could you report me? I'm your child." Or, "How you can take care of the baby, then you can take better care of the baby than you did me." Or, "You never let me get away with that." I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard that one a lot. Kinship caregivers' anger and resentment may arise from or be directed at the parent, the child, the agency, or professionals, or themselves. So resentment and anger towards the parent may be due to attempts to be reunited with the child, but the relative's opinion that the parent is irresponsible. Embarrassment and hurt to the child or family, and freedom from the responsibility of parenthood. Kinship caregivers may also feel resentment towards the child in their care due to the child's affection, loyalty, and identification with the defense of the parents. Child's desire to return or maintain contact with the parent, or behavioral problems such as acting out or ungrateful attitude. Kinship caregivers may also resent or be angry with professionals, community agencies, and institutions for taking the child from the parent if the caregiver feels that the removal was unjust, allowing the parent to have contact with the child, considering the return of the child to the parent, not providing adequate supportive services such as funding, legal assistance, daycare, or having a difficult criteria of requirements in order to become eligible for formal or legal caregiver status or for kinship care funding. Finally, kinship caregivers are sometimes angry at themselves for deciding to become caregivers. Caregivers may be angry at themselves for taking the responsibility of caring for a child after raising their own children, not being selfish enough, and helping parents avoid their responsibilities, but not wanting the children to end up in foster care. Child rearing practices and responsibilities. So many kinship caregivers are challenged by the changes in child rearing practices that have been taking place since they've last raised a child. So what was once considered normal, appropriate, and legal, a legal form of discipline, punishment, and limit settings may now be considered abusive or illegal. Kinship caregivers are confronted with the need to learn non-corporal approaches to discipline and limit settings such as denying privileges, verbal reprimands, and positive and negative reinforcement. Kinship caregivers may also need an education update to learn how to use computers or the new math to assist the child in completing their homework assignments. Kinship caregivers may also confront unfamiliar behavioral, emotional, and learning disabilities that may require medication or specific behavioral interventions and teaching techniques. It might be a challenge, and I mean, it's something to think about that, receiving these services for the kids if they need additional services. If you don't have full legal custody, you might have to make negotiations with the court systems, with the child advocates, child welfare system, and the parents as well. So it's just something to keep in mind that if you are seeking services for the kids, you might have to go through jumps and hurdles before you can get there, if you don't have the full legal guardianship. An elderly relative may not live long enough or be physically able to complete the raising of the child, especially a very young child. Thus, kinship caregivers need supportive services and systems in place to compensate for their physical and emotional limitations. Caregivers should develop morbidity and mortality plans to ensure the child's continued care if the caregiver should die or become physically or emotionally incapacitated. Overcompensation and competition. So many kinship caregivers feel extreme empathy and sympathy for the child and parent, given their history of domestic violence, child abuse or neglect, among other things. The caregiver may try to make up for the child's past losses and traumas. The task for the caregiver is to provide the child with balance. So balance and consistency are needed to offset extreme deprivation and instability, and overcompensation only reinforces the child's perception of human behavior and life as extremes rather than balanced. Part of the balancing process is finding a middle ground between being flexible and being firm, between nurturing and disciplining. We will talk more about this in a little bit when we talk about the different types of parenting styles. So many relatives speak of feeling forced into a competition with the parents, courts, agencies, and even the children by trying to prove that they are qualified and able to parent and raise the children better than their parents. Fantasies. Many kinship caregivers often express the hope of seeing the parent and the child reunited. Such fantasies may be problematic if the caregiver is unable to accept the reality of the parent's needs and limitations. Problems also arise if the caregiver is unable to protect the child from the parent because of those fantasies. So redefining relationships. To successfully assume a parental role, the caregiver must elicit from the child's dependency, confidence, and respect for the caregiver as a provider, protector, and authority figure in a parent-child relationship. Grandparents who take on the responsibility of raising their grandchildren must accept that they are now the disciplinarian, independent, and not in need of the child's approval or support. The grandchildren must give up the role of little helper. So you have heard this already, but your child did not come with How to Raise Me book. Each child is different, and therefore parenting your relative children can be difficult, especially when one thing worked for one kid and now it is not working on another. Children have different personality styles and interests, as we all do. Each of your children is a unique person. So it's important to take that into consideration and always remind yourself of that. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the different parenting styles. So it's just important to note that most research on parenting shows that there are 4 different types of parenting styles. However, that does not mean that these are the only ways to parent. Depending on one's culture and environment, one's parenting style may emerge as a more effective way to parent for you. However, after hearing about these different parenting styles, you may learn that parenting differently may be more effective. So there's the different, like I mentioned, the different parenting styles include permissive, authoritative, uninvolved, and authoritarian. The very responsive parent would be high control and high warmth. So that would be the authoritative parenting style. And what you would see from that kind of parenting style is that they're supportive and have rules. but they're also assertive and flexible. The high demand parent would be high control and low warmth. That would be the authoritarian parenting style. So they focus on obedience and rules. If I say jump, they say how high. The unresponsive parent would be the low control and low warmth. That would be the uninvolved parenting style. So they demonstrate uninterest, distant, and neglectful towards their children. And then the last one is the low demand parent, and that would be low control and high warmth. That would be the permissive parenting style. That's where they have no rules. They're indulgent and enabling. So just some things to think about and reflect on. You know, which style did your parents use to parent you when you were younger? You know, and which style do you use now? And then now looking at the different parenting styles that I mentioned, which would be the best for your family, if any of those? I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there might be some other kinds of parenting styles that you feel are more effective. So it's just nice to be able to reflect on like your past and how you were parented, and then which style you're using currently now with the children that are placed in your home, and then which one would you want to do moving forward in the future. So it's in the balance. Research shows parenting with the balance, you know, is very effective. Be supportive and have rules. Be flexible, knowing right from wrong, and caregivers helping the children to understand all of that is also very helpful. And in doing all of those things, you're parenting with the balance. And so that's something that we've seen has been very effective with a lot of the children that you might have in your home. So good attachment, parenting with the balance is important because it creates a supportive and consistent environment, which leads to good attachment. It's also a way to provide some guidance when everything is chaotic or you're not sure what to do as a caregiver. So now let's talk about some of the supportive tools that you can use when you might be dealing with a difficult situation. We must begin by identifying our buttons. What triggers or annoys you? Something important to think about can be reflected in this quote by Andy Smithson. So the sign of great parenting is not the child's behavior. The sign of truly great parenting is the parent's behavior. So it's just very important to look at yourself as a parent and see what you are doing that is kind of reflecting on the child's behavior. So once again, I would like you to take a few moments and reflect on this. So what pushes your buttons as a parent? So I want you to think of like what annoys you, you know, what do maybe the kids do that really push your buttons or that, you know, just you can't handle sometimes. What happens when your buttons are pushed? How do you react? What do you do? And what do you need to regulate yourself? Like what are some techniques or things that help you in staying calm and just regulating yourself before you explode maybe? So it's important to regulate, then relate, then reason. This statement was made by Dr. Bruce Perry, which is a psychiatrist that focuses on children's mental health and neurosciences as it relates to the child's brain development and the impact of trauma on a child's brain. So you might get questions from the relative children that are placed in your home or that are living in your home with you. So it's important to talk. These are some of the questions that might be helpful that maybe they might ask you, and it's good to be prepared to see how you're going to respond if they do ask you these questions. So where is my mom and dad? Why don't they live with us? When are they coming back? Do they miss me? Why do other kids have parents and I don't? Did I do something wrong? So some tips for talking with your children is be open and approachable. Allow your kids to ask questions without getting upset. Be patient and thoughtful as your child works through this process. Plan talking points. Tell the truth if it's age appropriate or you feel like the child in your home can handle it. Validate their feelings. Avoid bashing the biological parents. Share positive memories. Avoid comparing them to their biological parents. And then give them tools to cope. So some of the tips, or some tips for you to do to help your child cope is check in with your child. We had a hard discussion about your parent today. How are you feeling? That's a good question to ask all the time. Are you doing okay? I know we had a really difficult conversation. Just always checking in with them. And then some things that you can do that are stress reducers and that kind of help out, especially if you did have a very difficult discussion with them, is, go for a walk. Encourage them to do some journaling or deep breathing. Those are always very helpful coping skills that usually help kids a lot. So those are just some tips to help you. So that's the end of my presentation. And I just wanted to share, Relatives Raising Children is one of the books that I used to gather a lot of the information that I shared throughout the presentation. It's edited by Joseph Crumley and Robert L. Little. It's a really, really good book. I encourage you guys to take a look at this. I know we have copies for you guys that, you can request and you can take a look at this book. Because like I said, I gathered a lot of the information from here and I found it very, very helpful. So here it is. Can everyone see it? Okay, perfect. So Robin, she's gonna finish off with a very nice poem.
Well, as Itzel and I were preparing this presentation, we just wanted to take a minute just to really honor all the hard work that you parents are doing right now as you've taken these children into your home. And for me, I love poems, and this one just really seemed to fit. It's called I Cannot Give Away That Which Is Not Mine to Give. And it was written by a lady named Julie Alvarado, who is a foster mom and also the founder of Coaching for Life. I cannot provide peace, tranquility, and calm to a wounded child if I am not at peace and calm. I cannot provide safety to a child if I do not feel safe inside. I must remember my child's eyes before they were faraway eyes, before they looked right through me, before they were vacant. I must remember that my child has seen what no child should have ever seen, that my child has heard what no other child should ever have heard, that my child has felt what no child should ever felt. I must remember that the lens through which my child sees love, life, family, and relationships is not the same lens through which I see life, love, family, and relationships. My child comes from a land of hurt, shame, abuse, and neglect. My land is foreign to her. My child comes from a home of anger. My home is foreign to her. My child comes from a life of fear. My love is foreign to her. We simply cannot expect our children to move into our worlds when we cannot spare a few moments to join them in theirs. We simply cannot expect our children to trust us because we say so. Many before us have said many things. We simply cannot expect our children to obey us because we are right. They have been wronged too many times prior to our right. If we are to become the conduit of healing, to healing such pain in our wounded children, we must first heal ourselves. We simply cannot give away that which is not ours to begin with.